Good morning.
Good morning, Rochelle.
How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
It is
And
so
you?
lovely to see you again. I feel like it's been forever since I've seen you, but it's so lovely to see you again.
It's nice seeing you as well.
Absolutely. I will tell you, you made such an impact on me that I mean, I tell everybody I know about you. You if you listen to some of my chats, you'll hear your story out there. So we'll get to that. But so let me start by beginning to ask you, please share with us your name and anything you feel comfortable sharing so we can get to know you a little bit better, please.
Okay, my name is Cathy Hubbs. I was raised in Seattle, Washington, but I've been in the East Coast in the Washington, D.C. area since 1984, so over half my life now. And I am the Chief Information Security Officer at American University, and I've been working in higher ed in information security and IT for about, let's see, can I do the math? 23 years, something like that.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, how did you choose IT? How did that become something you thought you would want to do?
Yeah, that's an interesting story. I think it chose me.
Uh-huh.
Truly. So I had kind of a non-traditional route into my career. I was actually in the military. That's how I came to the Washington, D.C. area. And I married a military man in the Air Force, Washington, D.C. on Bolling Air Force Base. And I had a small child and had taken some time away, decided to actually separate in my fourth year
Mhm.
and just stayed home with my daughter. And then I went out and sought a position, and it happened to be working at an artificial intelligence lab for researchers in a small library where all these researchers were into IT, right? So they were doing robotics and artificial intelligence, expert learning, machine learning. This was in the late 80s. So this is very new to me. And so I just seemed like I fit in with these people and had an affinity for it. And then it took me a while, actually, until the late 90s to actually go back and start working on a slow path of getting educated to have my actual academics meet up with my practical hands-on experience. And it wasn't until 2002 that I went strictly into cybersecurity at George Mason University. So it was a circuitous path that was very much curiosity,
Mhm.
being at the right place at the right time,
Mhm.
and a self-learner and relationship building, right? It really, there was just a series of things that worked out very well for me, and I was kept grabbing at those opportunities and building on them. So it was not a traditional path whatsoever. And I was working at a state university at the time, um, in 2002, actually, when in the state of Virginia, they were starting from kind of the audit, the IT audit side was starting to inquire about having somebody at an institution that focused 100% on cybersecurity.
Mhm.
So again, kind of the right place at the right time. And because I was a very active member of a lot of different cross-functional teams on a lot of different conversations with IT, the CIO kind of plucked me out of the masses and really gave me an opportunity to build something out of nothing, really.
Yeah.
And I've been doing that ever since. It's been very collaborative through the higher ed, meeting people like you. My memory of meeting you back at Duke at that security awareness conversation was very touching. I love that you reach out on occasion and give me that positive feedback, because I feel like every time I'm in one of those conversations with a group and people like you, I learn so much. It's so insightful to hear the different perspectives. So it's just a continuous path. But I didn't pick it. I think it picked me in a sense.
I want to come back to your how you became who you are, but I want you to tell us a little bit about the term you told us when you came and talked to Duke. I tell people this term all the time, and it's such a accurate, absolutely correct thing. So, can you please share with us how did you come up? How did you develop that the term, and tell us a little bit about the term and what it means?
All right. Well, the term is heapy because you remind me, but I cannot say that I was the person that coined it. Like in any preparation for any talk, I'm always trying to look and see what the current conversation, and this particular conversation I came with security awareness, but it was also about people getting into the field of IT, right? And women in particular. and people just in general, other than white males, getting into the cybersecurity field. So that was what that talk was all about. And so heap heat was something I actually read about, and I'm not sure who coined the phrase, but the concept was that you're sitting in a room and you're the person at the table and you just explain something and it's as if you didn't even speak. And all of a sudden, the male in the room, typically a white male, restates it, and now everybody's on board. They're like, oh yeah, what he said. And you're just sitting there going, was I invisible? Am I a ghost? Did I not speak here? And clearly it resonated with you. It still today, I have wonderful colleagues, but I will tell you, it still happens today where somehow my words need to be rearranged and repeated or heaped in order to be acknowledged in the room.
Absolutely. And so one of the interesting things about IT is how we as women are seen. So as a white woman with years of experience, tremendous successes, do you find it still challenging to succeed in your role? And do you find yourself supported by your leadership or your colleagues or whoever? Can you, if you can speak about that, can you say?
Yeah, I think that it has a lot to do with our personalities and opportunities for sure. And I think I will say personally, right, there's moments of emotion, right, where I'm feeling not supported, but I'll do a gut check and I'm a very positive, glass half full kind of person. But I have been very fortunate. The IT field is dominated by white males still. And so my mentors have been white males. My first was, but I feel very fortunate that it was less the way he mentored me, and my second one as well, was less about being a woman and just more about creating opportunity. And so it is hard not to look through the lens of what we represent, white woman, right? Especially when you walk into a room. It's hard not to do a head count. It's difficult.
Right.
But I feel by and large, I've had good support and some cheerleading to a degree, right? To help push myself out there. And I absolutely have reached very deep to push myself out there. And I will say, aging doesn't hurt. Experience, right? And being a mother helps, a mother of a daughter. And I think just the more you put yourself out there and the more you connect with wonderful, intelligent, experienced women like yourself, you start to build up that team and that spirit and understand you're not alone.
Yeah.
And there are a number of amazing males out there, more, I think, than less, that are just frankly, just sometimes just unaware. Yeah. They just don't see it. They don't. But when you bring it to their attention, they're on board and many want to help make that difference. So that comment about unconscious bias is just, or that the study and the science of that is just so real. We're in these habit patterns, and to be able to come out of that is really true. But my personal experiences, I think in most of I have never had a female mentor that I didn't select, right, as a supervisor. But the males that I had absolutely were there to work and help me explore and promote, right? Self-promote and stand behind me and give me opportunity. So I've been fortunate.
Yeah. In my 45 years, I've never had reported to a woman, white, black, blue, green, or any other color, never. But I want to go back to something you said earlier. So you, from the work and stuff you were doing, someone saw something in you and handpicked you for this job. Is that a rule or an anomaly?
Well, I can only speak from my own personal experience, right? So in this particular case, when they were looking for it, they said it was the fact that I was a relationship builder, right? And that was the quality, that was the key quality, at least at that time, that they were looking for, right? So it was less about my technical chops and more about almost something we say about Congress, right? Could you reach across the aisle, right? Or can you bring an engagement and a conversation with these people to come together? And as you and I have talked in other settings, right? Cybersecurity is a conversation that can be tough, right? It can be, there's a lot of terminology, there can be fear, there can be vulnerabilities there can just be like a lot of, you're in my way, I can't get things done. And so that relationship building was a big thing. So I don't know if it's a rule or, right, I'm not sure I have the answer for that.
That was a setup question because I really wanted to tell you that has never happened to me. No one ever saw value in me, so I apply for a job and I may or may not get it. My job at Duke, I only got because I had experience in the area in which we live. It's an area here called Research Triangle Park. And I had, worked for almost all the companies in the park as a consultant, dealing with things. And so I had experience. And so Duke hired me because they had a problem with an audit. But almost rarely does anybody see me and say, hey, I'm going to give her a shot, even though she may so if you had a job in cybersecurity, you may say, well, she hasn't done this as a job, as her title. Someone says, oh yeah, I'm going to give her that job. That doesn't happen for me. And I will say that for the majority of Black and brown women that I know in IT, that is exactly the case. And more times than not, you're constantly scrutinized about your work. So when I asked you about being supported, it's more like you're not up to par, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So I have Black and brown women friends, and I'm continuing to educate myself through personal experiences and talking with them and their experiences and reading stories about these experiences. And what you share is real. Yeah. From what I'm reading and from my experiences through my friends is Black women in particular, right? That this is a fundamental problem that we have from the hiring process, from the beginning of how we post our jobs, to the hiring committee, to the internal collaborations that once the person is actually hired, to that promotion path. And it takes intentional, purposeful engagement. And I think it takes beyond possibly the hiring manager, right? That's a group, especially if we're white female, white male, right? We all have bias, but us in particular, we have a lot of bias, and we have to I'm using the word again and again because I think it has to be intentional and purposeful, and it can't just be that one person in order to not just hire, but as you said, I know you, Rochelle, well enough, right? And you are such a contributor. How is somebody not seeing that, right? The value add. So that means, to me, the system is broken.
Something wrong with my skin color. My skin color is defective or something. Let me just say something about what you said. So when I was getting my doctorate degree, and someone made fun of me because I said I had never heard this word before. Someone said homosocial reproduction. And for a moment there, I was like, okay, I had to tear the word apart. So I got reproduction. I knew what that was. Homosocial reproduction. It means I prefer to work, play, and live with people that look like me. Now, I had not applied that, but then the person then went further to say what's formerly known as the old boys club, right? So that's what it is. So when I am going to hire, promote, go play golf or whatever it is, I want to do it with people that look like me because I'm most comfortable with that. And I think that's a genuine thing, because, if well, I wouldn't say you, but if I and another white woman were out somewhere together, and I mentioned to her that my son is academically gifted or whatever it is, she may question me, right? So I'm not that smart, so how can your son be that smart? So like there's that, so and she may mean that in that unconscious biased way, but what I heard was that there's something wrong with me. And so for that homosocial reproduction, if I'm more, I don't have to worry about those slips, those Freudian slips, right? Or if I say something that may be misunderstood, I don't have to worry about that. Okay, so my next question is this. So in the world of cybersecurity, how vulnerable is the non-academic populations compared to the academic populations in terms of understanding what it means, how it looks, the things that they should do, what is the difference, or the demographic or the economist difference between those two groups?
So I haven't studied it directly, but I would imagine that the accessibility to information and the distribution and is a big challenge, right? Because we hear about, just like, think about grocery stores, right? Desert islands, right? Or deserts, right? I'm sorry, food deserts, that's the right terminology, sorry. But the same kind of a thing I would imagine exists in, where are you as a vulnerable population getting your information from in a trusted way? And with cybersecurity in particular, we know that there's the haves and the have-nots with the technology divide, right? So there's already maybe a lack of technology, a lack of understanding how technology works. And we know that cyber criminals are preying on all of us, but that's an even more vulnerable group of individuals, because they've been preyed on in different ways, not just in tech, right? So how do we reach? I'm not sure what the answer is, but I think that that's the biggest thing, is how do we reach out, and how do we provide what's the distribution? What's the way to reach these people, like these vulnerable populations? If it's not through school, if it's not through the education, if it's not through the neighbor, right? If it's not through postal mail and email, I mean, how do we reach? Do we do it through community forums? But I think we have a lot of work to do, because again, it's building up those safe spaces to even accept the person that's coming in to transfer the knowledge, simplify it, but more importantly, just be able to meet them in the place that they're at, to be able to accept what you're sharing about how to interact with the technology to protect themselves.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a two-part question now. Did you see the video of Mr. Floyd's death?
Yes.
And the other part of that question is did it seem new, or was it something shocking, like were you aware that this happens more than just in that instance?
Yeah, it was not new, but it was compounding. It just felt like it was particularly it was particularly upsetting, the length of it, it was just so personal, the way it was filmed and brought forth. It was just really felt like this could be anybody, and this should not happen to any human being. It was visceral.
Yeah. And so going back, just in the last year, the number of Black and brown people that have been killed by law enforcement, why was Mr. Floyd's death so much more impactful than all of those other lives? So, I think you may have seen Oprah just recently change the cover of her magazine, where she's always on the cover. And then she bought 26 billboards for the number of years Breonna Taylor was alive. Why would the previous instances of Black people killed by law enforcement different from Mr. Floyd's?
I can't answer that except for to just kind of, suppose, right, or put forth it, just say that there's a lot of things going on in this country. And, what is that tipping point? I put one more card on the deck. I put one more rock on the pile, and it just can't take it anymore. Can't take it anymore. And it just, I don't think it's meant to, take away from the previous lives that have been lost in horrific ways. But it just feels like, there's these perfect storms, and it just felt like people have just had enough. I don't know if it's on top of the pandemic, I'll say it, the lack of leadership in this country, the disregard for human life. It just is pervasive. And I don't know if it's people at home, with this pandemic and having additional problems that just compounded it to just laser focus on life and the importance of life. And that's too much.
Yeah.
Life, anybody's life. But in particular, to just shine that light on how can we, in today's world, be treating anybody like this? It's just unacceptable.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you a question about Black lives, but I want to give you an anecdote before. So when I think about Black lives and the response to the predominantly white community about Black lives, it reminds me of a fire, right? So you call the fire department because the house is on fire. And the fire department arrives on the street and they start pouring water on the houses that are not on fire. They're just pouring water on these houses. And the house over here that's on fire burns all the way to the ground and it's destroyed. And so in my mind, Black lives is that example, right? So it's not that the house that is not on fire doesn't matter. It's not that all the houses along that street, but that one house that's on fire is the one that needs the attention. What are your thoughts about Black Lives Matter and the movement and the, I guess, the opposition to it or the resistance to it or the concern that we're not saying all lives matter?
Boy, put me on the spot.
I know I can't help myself. I'm bad Rochelle.
No, I appreciate it. No, it's good. This is it's a vulnerable conversation, right? I think that as myself and the way I was raised, and this is, I think, a flaw somewhat, is we're all equal, we're all the same. And that is the problem, right? We have the opportunity we should all have the opportunity for equal access, but we aren't all the same, right? And we need to recognize that and explore and celebrate that. And within that, provide the opportunities. I just read a quote last night, and I hope I get it right. It's pretty short, is unity is not uniformity.
Absolutely. 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 Okay, so we have 5 minutes, all yours, to talk about whatever you wish to talk about.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
Let's just call it a wrap. Haven't we done it? We've gone deep here. I appreciate this opportunity to be able to have this conversation with you, Rochelle. I'm so glad that I touched you and you touched me and that you've reached out a couple times. I'm glad that you're taking your personal experience and your career experience and sharing it with others and providing this opportunity to nurture this conversation, because we still have a long ways to go and we cannot let it go for a minute. And this is a lifelong journey, and it is so easy. We know neurological science that says our brains form kind of ruts. I've heard it say like wagon wheels, like old-timey wagon wheels going across the country. And our thoughts fall into those grooves, right? And those are just the way it is. And so it takes a lot to pull up out of those ruts and to get right tracked, right? And to be able to really think this. So we cannot let this go. We know this has been happening for hundreds of years. And you asked a very important question. Why now? Why this death? Why this? And we've had those conversations in the past. So we need to just keep putting the energy behind it. So people like you having these conversations and continuing to have these dialogues and put this out here so we can all be vulnerable and really explore where we're coming from and how we can make a difference is just really important and impactful and powerful. And I really just appreciate you and thank you for reaching out to me to have this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I have, somebody asked me how long I'm going to do this, so probably till I die, but my purpose of doing these is to have people share their stories, because I think we can learn from each other. And, we don't have a collective place where we can go put all these stories together. I am not the best person at doing this, but, to me, it seems so important to have different views and experiences shared so that someone who didn't have this experience can learn from it, or from somebody who had a different kind of experience can appreciate it. And I will say, Cathy, I think you're a brilliant woman. I mean, I am just
Thank
so
you.
blessed to know you, and your humanity shows every single day, every single time I talk to you, every time I have an interaction. And I am grateful that you were willing to chat with me, and I hope you will stay in touch and we can continue. But the work you do speaks for yourself. So you can pat yourself on the back. Yes, you do benefit from white privilege, but you are a human being. And no matter how white or whatever you are, being human is way more important than the color of your skin.
Amen to that. Thank you for your kind words, Rochelle.
Absolutely. So thank you so much. As soon as the video converts, I will send it to you, and we will be in touch. Thank you so much again. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Let's stay in touch. Thank you for all that you do.
Absolutely. Thank you. Be safe.
You too. Be
And
safe.
stay out of that Washington traffic. How do you manage to stay away? I mean, that I hate going to DC. Y'all have the worst traffic in the planet.
The one silver lining, and not to be flip, but about COVID, very nice not to have to be driving in that traffic for sure.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad you don't have to drive in that traffic and you're getting to work remotely. Thank you again so much, Cathy. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.